Before I get started with the story, let me give a shout out to VDina10 on Twitter for tagging me in this story. So this is actually, it's kind of an update in a way of a story that we've already heard. Now, if y'all not familiar, basically there was an incident that happened, I believe it was last year, with a black man by the name of Eric Lurie, and he was placed inside the back of a squad car where he was then held by his neck and had his nose, his nostrils, his breathing passages blocked, and he could not breathe. And I think they held it there for damn near 2 minutes, and the guy basically passed out and he died. So you're probably wondering who this guy is. Well, this guy's name is Sergeant Javier Esqueda, and I'm guessing that's how you pronounce his name, is Esqueda. He is the one that leaked the footage that we all saw that literally brought awareness to this story, because, you know, before them, no one saw anything. But he's the one who leaked it. But to make matters even worse for this guy, he is now facing prison time. Now, I don't know how or why he's facing prison time. I won't be surprised if it's because he was the one that leaked it, but I don't want to jump the gun. So I'm going to go ahead and read this article that's coming from USA Today that was posted on September 8th, 2021. Sergeant Javier Esqueda replayed the recorded images in his mind as he lay awake at night. A handcuffed black man, barely conscious, swayed against the backseat of a police squad car. "Wake up, bitch," an officer said as he slapped the man. The officer clutched at the man's throat with one hand and pinched his nose shut with the other. Esqueda counted how long the man seemed to be without air, 20 seconds so far. The officer tried to pull the man's mouth open, 30 seconds. Another officer poked a service baton in the man's mouth, jabbing the insides of his cheek, 1 minute. Finally, the officers pulled out a few plastic baggies partially filled with white powder. 1 minute and 38 seconds. Esqueda, a former Marine reservist and 27-year veteran of the Joliet, Illinois Police Department, knew that was a long time to hinder someone's breath, especially someone with drugs in his mouth and in medical distress. 10 hours after the squad car's camera recorded the January 2020 incident, Eric Lurie, age 37, died of a drug overdose at a nearby hospital. Months went by and the public still had no idea that instead of getting Lurie immediate medical attention, the officers knew he had swallowed drugs, didn't seem to care. Esqueda had heard a rumor about the video that it was bad, but didn't give it much thought. Then he watched with the rest of the nation as another black man, George Floyd, was killed in Minneapolis by a police officer. 3 officers stood by while Derek Chauvin pressed his knee to Floyd's neck for 9 minutes. Where were the so-called good cops to stop this? Esqueda heard people ask. So in May 2020, Esqueda logged into the department system to watch the video of Lurie's arrest. He was stunned not only by what he saw, but also by how little impact the death in custody seemed to have. It wasn't in the news. An outside investigation had stalled. The officers were still working as if nothing happened. Even Lurie's own family hadn't seen the video. It's a cover-up, Esqueda thought. For weeks, Esqueda agonized over what he should do about it. Finally, he leaked the footage to a local television reporter. Within days, Esqueda's bosses suspended him. His friends and peers abandoned him. Even worse, Joliet police arrested him on felony charges of official misconduct that could land him in prison for up to 20 years. Now listen to that. This guy actually got reprimanded for doing the right thing. That's why I said I could never be in law enforcement, because to do the right thing means that I'm putting my life at risk. They literally turned on him in the blink of an eye. He even knew this was a cover-up, and he knew what he was doing was risky. Let's just put that on the table. He knew him leaking this footage was a risk, not only on his job, but probably his life. That's why I keep telling you, law enforcement acts like a damn gang. And he's the one that could face up to 20 years in prison. Imagine that. At a hearing scheduled for today, and by the time this video gets uploaded, I'm sure it's going to probably be some more stuff that's going to come out. At a hearing scheduled for today, Kendall County Chief Circuit Judge Robert Pilmer could set a trial date. In the wake of Floyd's death, USA Today set out to document how law enforcement agencies respond when one of their own exposes police corruption, brutality, or other misconduct. Reporters found systemic unchecked retaliation at departments large and small across the country. Sounds about right. Esqueda's case emerged as a textbook example of the lengths at some departments, along with prosecutors and other powerful local officials, will go to punish whistleblowers and scare their colleagues into silence. By undermining his department's carefully crafted narrative around Lori's death, Esqueda crossed a sacred line drawn through the world of the American policing. The unwritten rule that cops should never snitch on one another. Doesn't that sound like a gang? And they try to tell black people if you see something, say something, but they don't even apply that shit to themselves. I knew it was going to be bad, and I was ready for it to be bad. I knew what I was going up against, Esqueda said, but I never thought I was going to be sitting in jail not for telling the truth. Like many officers accused of misconduct, the Joliet cops involved in Lori's death faced no criminal charges after prosecutors and the coroner said the officers were not responsible. Internally, they blamed it heavily or solely on the drugs, not that what we saw in the video that hindered his breathing. If they hadn't done that, this guy probably would have lived, and all they would have had to do was just pump his stomach. Internally, the department either cleared them or issued short suspensions. The officer who put the baton in Lori's mouth was fired months later after he was arrested on an unrelated domestic violence charge. 3 other officers remained within the agency. After Esqueda stepped forward, Lori's family filed a lawsuit against the department that claims police contributed to Lori's death by failing to immediately get medical assistance once they knew he ingested drugs. Community leaders in the small town of Joliet, 45 minutes outside of Chicago, have said police misled them by withholding key details about the interaction, reviving suspicions that they played a role in Lori's death. Alan Rochner, who was Joliet's police chief at the time and ordered Esqueda's arrest, told USA Today he couldn't say much because Esqueda's criminal case is still open and prosecutors might call him as a witness, but he said Esqueda is no whistleblower. Basically trying to say that he acted outside of what he should have done. But they say he's not a whistleblower, but technically in a way he kind of is. Because basically to be a whistleblower, you're exposing corruption, and that's exactly what he did. Current Joliet Police Chief Dawn Malik said it would be inappropriate for her to comment on Lori's death or Esqueda's charges because of the ongoing civil and criminal cases. Malik had been scheduled to announce Esqueda's department punishment at an August 27th hearing, but days after a USA Today reporter requested interviews with her and other city officials about Esqueda's case, she postponed the hearing until September 21st. Malik has concluded the internal investigation, and records show she sustained 3 pages of internal violations against Esqueda, including conduct unbecoming of an officer, improper release of evidence, and making a public statement about the department without prior permission from the police chief. Well, they had to do something. He had to do something because y'all wasn't going to do it. Y'all never had any intention on doing it. So he did it. And see, they just mad because now they got scrutiny coming their way. They watched that video and had every intention of not releasing it. That's just like the guy who recorded Eric Garner's death. They arrested and threw him in jail. And not that Daniel Pantaleo fool. The prosecutors who filed the criminal charges also declined to comment. Esqueda said it's clear to him that breaching law enforcement's code of silence has made him a pariah. These were my fellow officers, my friends. He said now if something happened to me or if I died, they'd probably have a party. For weeks, Esqueda had mostly ignored rumors that a video existed might cast his police department in a bad light. When another sergeant suggested that he check it out, Esqueda said he wasn't interested. But a few days after Floyd's last moments were broadcast to the world, Esqueda changed his mind. He logged into the police department's evidence system with his assigned username and password. If the case was still under investigation, the system would have locked him out of the video. It opened right away. The 62-minute video begins before 4 p.m. near the intersection of East Washington and South Hebert Streets in Joliet. Lori, in a bright red-orange hooded sweatshirt, is standing at the front bumper of a squad car. 2 officers, Jose Tellez and his trainee Andrew McCoo, wrestle Lori to the ground and put him in cuffs with his hands behind his back. They place him in the back of the squad car. The video shows Lori chewing on something. He's breathing heavily. It's unclear whether the officers can see what he's doing, but the auto picks up Tellez saying he believes Lori might have put a bunch of the drugs he had on him in his mouth. He's got something in his mouth, Tellez later adds about the drugs. I don't know how much, but he's still got some in there. Esqueda noted that the officers didn't call for paramedics to bring Lurie to the hospital as required by department policy when an officer believes someone in custody requires medical attention. Instead, between the time Tellez is first recorded saying he believes Lurie ingested drugs and the time they arrived at the police station, officers left Lurie in the back seat for at least 11 minutes. During much of that time, Lurie is still chewing on something. By the time they reach the precinct parking lot, Lurie is barely conscious. McCoo expresses his disapproval as he tries to get him out of the squad car. "We're not doing this today," the recording captures him saying as he tries to pull Lurie's feet onto the concrete. McCoo rubs Lurie's sternum, but he doesn't respond. One of 4 indicators, according to the department protocol, that he is suffering from an opiate overdose. Lurie already displayed at least 2 other indicators: the presence of drugs and shallow breathing. It is unclear from the black and white video whether Lurie's lips had a bluish tinge, the 4th sign listed in the department's policy. Instead of calling for paramedics, Sergeant Doug May slaps Lurie and holds his nose. At some point, May said he saw a bag of drugs in Lurie's mouth, according to a report later found by Lieutenant Jeremy Harrison. That's when Harrison determined Lurie was suffering a medical emergency. May's statement was not recorded, however, because Tellez had turned off the audio by then. As the video continues, Harrison requests a flashlight or baton to prop Lurie's mouth open. Officers remove the bags and tells Harrison that Lurie has stopped breathing, according to Harrison's report. Then Harrison calls paramedics. Just as they called the paramedics way after they were supposed to. But they wanted to be Billy badasses and deal with it themselves. Just as he had watched when Floyd died, Esqueda cried as he saw what happened to Lurie, but in this case it was worse. These were officers that I knew. Tellez's training report didn't mention that officers had slapped Lurie and restricted his breathing or jammed the baton in his mouth. It simply said Tellez and McCoo had arrested a man suspected of swallowing drugs. The report seemed intentionally vague, Esqueda said, and didn't even note that Lurie had died. And see, the reason why they probably told him that a fraction of what happened is so no one would go looking for what actually happened. But it took him watching what happened with George Floyd to realize, okay, something is making me want to go watch this. So it took another black man to die in the sense of him not being able to breathe for him to go find this video. And that's how we saw what we saw. But I didn't know that the video was 62 minutes long, because we only saw just the part where they put their hands over his nostrils. Esqueda did not find out until later that Tellez had turned off the audio on the dash cam, but he thought it was strange that sound suddenly stopped. To me, it looked like it was being tampered with, Esqueda said. I knew it wasn't an accident. Months had passed between Lurie's death and when Esqueda first watched the video, yet he saw no signs of an active investigation into what happened. McCoo was a recruit under Esqueda's supervision and Tellez was his training officer. Yet nobody reported to Esqueda that a man died after one of their arrests, and none of the officers involved had been placed on leave. Esqueda then decided to make a copy of the video just in case something should happen to the original. Outside his police career, Esqueda is a member of the nonprofit Star Wars Club that dons elaborate costumes to walk in parades and visits Children's Hospital. He once performed in full Stormtrooper regalia at a birthday party for the police chief's grandson. Esqueda liked to make videos of those events, so his wife had brought him a GoPro camera. He used it to record the video of Lurie's arrest. 2 days later, a supervisor over Joliet's police field training program confronted Esqueda to ask why the video access log showed he had twice watched the video. Esqueda told reporters he tried to explain what had disturbed him about Lurie's arrest, but the captain told him to shut up. He gave Esqueda clear instructions: write a short memo explaining only why he had accessed the video without detailing its contents. So literally, like I said, I keep telling y'all, the police departments are like a gang. And this story right here is detailing that for you. In a June 2020 memo, Esqueda wrote in just 2 sentences that he had heard rumors of misconduct, including by an officer he was ultimately responsible for training. He wanted to ensure that the officers involved had conducted themselves appropriately. The memo includes no judgment of what Esqueda saw. He submitted the memo and took stock of the situation. A man was dead, and video evidence suggested that Joliet officers, at best, neglected a neglected him during a medical emergency. The public knew nothing about what happened, and a superior had instructed him to write a memo about watching the video, but gave explicit orders to omit what he had seen. Esqueda's nagging suspicions about a potential cover-up overwhelmed him. I thought they were going to bury it. The video had in fact become one of Joliet's worst kept secrets. Less than 2 weeks after Esqueda made his copy, 3 city councilmen and Joliet Mayor Bob DeKirk, a former member of the local police department, sent a letter to Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul to request an investigation into Lurie's death. Meanwhile, Joliet's police officials worked to get ahead of the impending controversy. They called together a group of pastors and other black community leaders to view the video. Now, talk about trying to run interference. An attorney representing the Lurie family was not allowed to join. According to one of the pastors present, the video police showed them did not include any sound. Instead, an officer walked them through what they were seeing, crafting a narrative of how officers employed techniques intended to save Lurie's life. Ain't that some shit? Because in the original video, it had audio in there up until the audio was cut. So you could actually hear it, but they went back and they made sure to mute the entire video. So you heard nothing, and only you could take the word, quote unquote, of the pigs that were involved to try to throw off the scent. Those pastors, including Reverend Herbert Brooks, a Will County board member, released a statement in July calling criticism of the police unfounded. But in a recent interview, Brooks said he and his fellow pastors were not shown the full video and they did not hear the audio. They also didn't know Lurie's family hadn't been allowed to see it. The family had a right to see and hear the full unedited material, Brooks told USA Today, and the omissions and aversions shown to pastors now seem suspicious. What do you have to hide? Brooks asked of the department. If there's no foul play, why can't we see it? More than a week after the pastor saw the video, police officials invited Lurie's wife, Nicole, and other relatives to view it themselves. Again, there was no sound from the actual incident. Instead, the video had captions, and a sergeant standing next to the screen provided the narrative about trying to save Lurie's life. On July 1st, 2020, according to local news reports, Joliet police officers hosted a third viewing for a group of local reporters. They weren't allowed to make copies. That same day, Esqueda shared his copy, which included the audio, with a local CBS news station. Esqueda appeared in an on-camera interview that aired along with the video that evening, and he criticized his fellow officers for the way they treated Lurie. 2 internal affairs officers showed up at Esqueda's house to take his badge and gun. Rochner had placed him on administrative leave because he felt the leak had compromised an active investigation. Christine M. Cole, executive director of the Boston-based Crime and Justice Institute, said that reasoning didn't make sense. It feels to me this is an example of hypocrisy, she said. The command staff felt they could share this video to the people they wanted to share it with, but when a field officer shares it to hold his own department accountable, he's prosecuted for it. Esqueda said he spent part of the next 4 months on desk duty, but his bosses gave him no work. Meanwhile, he said his fellow officers, some that he known for more than 2 decades, shot him dirty looks or walked in the opposite direction if they saw him. Former recruits he trained stopped saying hello. Even secretaries stopped speaking whenever he was around. In October 2020, investigators arrested Esqueda on official misconduct charges. They gave him the option of immediately posting bail so he wouldn't have to go to jail. He made 2 fists and put his hands out in front of him, wrists up so they could handcuff him. If we're going to do this, then let's do it, he said. Esqueda's relationship with the department had already been troubled. A month before he watched the Lurie video, Esqueda had filed an age discrimination complaint with the EEOC claiming he was wrongly passed over for a promotion. That complaint was eventually dismissed. Before that May, the officer who slapped Lurie and held his nose closed had included Esqueda's name in an email to Internal Affairs that listed officers who needed remedial training. May said Esqueda had problems with decision-making, paying attention, sleeping, and texting in class. After he leaked the Lurie video, several of Esqueda's fellow officers told investigators he planned to use the video as a trump card against his bosses if they fired or disciplined him in an unrelated internal investigation concerning the arrest of a woman at a July 2019 prayer vigil. In that case, a woman filed a lawsuit against the city, Esqueda, and 2 other officers. The lawsuit alleges that Esqueda had mocked her, calling her a baby, when she complained after another officer tackled her and injured her knee. Her lawsuit is ongoing. An internal affairs investigation cleared the officer who allegedly tackled the woman, but 5 days after Esqueda leaked the Lurie video, he received a 1-day suspension on a charge of failure to supervise the officer. Esqueda considered it absurd that he would leak the video simply to insulate himself against such a minor allegation. Why would I risk my freedom, my family, my pension, and everything I work for something like that? The Fraternal Order of the Police Supervisors Association is paying for Esqueda's attorney since he is a member, but its president, Pat Cardwell, declined to speak in support of him. Clearly, I'm not going to, Cardwell said. I represent my guys. I don't defend them. But he did just that for another member 2 years ago, calling into a radio station to defend him against allegations he'd been drinking on the job. Nick, before I go any further, this article is exposing a whole lot. It's exposing a lot. Nick Bayer, who until May was a watch commander at another police department outside Chicago, said the accusations against Esqueda are part of the retaliation playbook departments use to discredit whistleblowers. He should know. Until this past May, Bayer was a 27-year veteran at the Niles Police Department an hour north of Joliet. That's when he claims his supervisors came after him after he complained about fellow officers. When they found a part-time city employee passed out at a drive-thru, they drove him home without a sobriety test, said Bayer, who sued the department in August, in what he described as a cover-up. They also turned off their body cameras and didn't file any paperwork. The department put Bayer on administrative leave, demoted him, and investigated him for bogus infractions, he alleged in the suit. He decided to resign rather than be fired. One of his fellow officers, a man he'd known for 20 years and considered a friend, threatened to put a bullet in his head if he told his supervisors more about the alleged cover-up. The ordeal took a personal toll, he said. He started drinking wine and vodka in the mornings and was eventually hospitalized for a major depressive episode. Shortly after going public, Bayer received a call from Esqueda, whom he did not previously know. He noted the similarities of their situations. It's like they have this playbook they use when they come after you, Bayer said in an interview. No matter where you are, they do the same things. Cynthia Mines, who worked for the Joliet Police Department for 28 years before she retired in 2009, said her experience shows Esqueda is up against a decades-old playbook in that agency. Because she refused to ignore fellow officers' bad behavior, Mines said she was unfairly arrested on unwarranted obstruction charges in an incident involving several of her family members. She went to trial and was acquitted. Mines said her problems continued when she pulled an overly aggressive fellow officer off an arrestee, who she says was on the ground and under control. A memo from the Times shows the officer was Doug May, the same officer who slapped and choked Lurie years later. Other officers had to separate her and May, Mines said. Her complaint against him didn't result in discipline, according to the memo. After that, she said colleagues refused to speak to her, and her calls for backup were often ignored. You have to stand for what's right no matter at what cost, Mines said, and Javier is paying the ultimate price for that. While Esqueda bosses branded him a criminal, they also minimized the actions of the officers to Lurie's case. After Esqueda leaked the video, the department posted a 27-minute edited version of it to YouTube. It is captioned to present the officer's actions in a more favorable manner. When May slapped Lurie, the caption ignores the fact that May said, "Wake up, bitch," and simply states undercover officer slaps Mr. Murray in the face to get his attention in an attempt to get him to comply with commands. Records obtained by USA Today show May told investigators he was aiming to clap Lurie on the shoulder or chest and only hit his face by accident. According to the task force investigators' report, May was allowed to review the dash cam footage before being interviewed. By pinching Lurie's nose and putting his hands around Lurie's throat, May also appears to have violated the 2015 Illinois law that bans chokeholds or any lesser contact with the throat or neck area of another in order to prevent the destruction of evidence by ingestion. The law goes on to define a chokehold as the application of any direct pressure to the throat, windpipe, or airway of another with the intent to reduce or prevent the intake of air. The law was passed after the 2014 death of Eric Garner from a police chokehold in Staten Island, New York, which brought increased scrutiny to the practice. According to his own written statement, May said he intentionally tried to restrict Lurie's breathing. In my experience, this has been very successful in getting arrestees who are attempting to conceal narcotics in their mouth to open their mouth due to a hard time breathing, May wrote in a report after paramedics took Lurie to a local hospital. In the same report, May said he initially didn't believe that Lori was having a medical emergency and was only faking being unresponsive. That goes back to whenever black people have a medical emergency and they don't take it seriously, just like when it comes to mental illnesses, they don't like to take that seriously either. It was only after McCoo had extracted a bag of cocaine from Lori's mouth that May said he believed that Lori was having a medical emergency. According to his report, but he then added that he believed Lori having the bags in his mouth presented a choking hazard, citing it as another reason as to why they wanted to take the drugs out of his mouth. USA Today reporters showed the video of Lori's arrest to 5 law enforcement experts who all agreed officers should have immediately taken Lori to the hospital or called paramedics if they thought he had ingested drugs. Chuck Ryland, a use of force expert with a specialty on chokeholds, said although the case technically fits the definition of a chokehold, the ultimate factor is whether the officers were doing it to preserve evidence or to save Lori's life. Both Ryland and Cole say holding someone's nose to get them to spit something out is a decades-old technique that police are no longer taught to use. Ryland said he was also shocked when he saw McCoo put the baton in Lori's mouth. I was like, oh my God, what are they doing? That's outside of normal policy or training protocol. I've never seen it. May's action during Lori's arrest resulted in a 7-day suspension at the end of the Department of Internal Affairs investigation. Tellers also received a 6-day suspension after investigators determined that he had intentionally turned off the microphone, just as Esqueda had suspected. Neither McCoo, the officer who put the baton in Lori's mouth, nor Harrison, the officer who told him to do it, received any punishment. Yet the person on the screen who leaked the video is the one that's going to possibly receive punishment. Cole, also a member of the Council on Criminal Justice, said the fact that the 4 officers were cleared while Esqueda was charged with a felony is likely to have a chilling effect on other officers coming forward to report misconduct. The sergeant recognized this as an inappropriate behavior and was trying to get someone to pay attention to what are probably systemic problems, and that's laudable, she said of Esqueda. Had it not been for Esqueda, Eric Lurie's widow says she might still be wondering what really happened to her husband. Nicole Lurie, a graduate of Jackson State University with a degree in biology, was working as a chemical mixer for Ecolabs in Joliet for 13 years ago when she first met Eric. They talked for hours. He had dreams of opening up his own barbershop and eventually a school for barbers. Maybe he'd run his own trucking company one day too. She said he wanted to be his own boss and make sure his 3 children would never struggle financially. I kind of like that, Nicole said of Eric's ambition, so I wanted to be a part of that and be able to help him reach those goals. They had a courthouse wedding 2 years later. A few relatives and friends celebrated with them at Al's Steakhouse on Jefferson Street in Joliet and then waved goodbye as the newlyweds headed for a honeymoon in downtown Chicago. A month before his death, Nicole picked up Eric from the police station after he was arrested on a drug charge. She was angry and confused. He had just graduated from barber school and had enrolled in school to obtain his commercial driver's license. That had been the plan, not drugs. She said Eric turned his back when she asked him why. The only thing he told her was that he needed to provide for his family. When Nicole saw her husband alive for the last time, he was in the intensive care unit at Amita Street, Joseph's Medical Center, Joliet branch. He had been stripped of his shirt and laid on a gurney. Erratic, violent spasms shook his body. The doctors let her get close enough to touch him. She ran her palm up and down her husband's forearm, patted his chest, rubbed his stomach, and told him it would be okay. The doctor explained it was bad. He'd never seen someone in this condition survive. At 2 a.m. there was a cold blue. Hospital records show they tried to revive Eric for 22 minutes before Nicole finally told them they could stop. Tears streaming down her face, Nicole sat and waited for the medical examiner to collect her husband's body. Later that evening, a Joliet police sergeant informed reporters Lurie had died of an apparent drug overdose. Most details of his encounter with the police were omitted. A month later, Nicole found out she was pregnant with twin boys who had been her and Eric's only children together. It was bittersweet, she said. She said she tried every day to keep her stress level down, even after she fought to get answers about what happened. But a week after she viewed the video of her husband's arrest, she had a miscarriage. The ashes of her unborn son sit in an ombre blue urn encased in silver metal leaves on top of her fireplace opposite of a smiling photo of her and Eric. Nicole Lurie's wrongful death lawsuit against Joliet police is ongoing. Michael Bersani, the lead attorney in the case from the firm hired to defend the city and the 4 officers against the lawsuit, said in an interview last week that the amount of drugs reported in Lurie's system after his death proved that he died of a self-induced overdose. He's the one who put the drugs in his mouth, Bersani said. The city's position is that his death had nothing to do with what the officers did or didn't do. The criminal case against Esqueda could go to trial in January, and the postponement of his final internal discipline hearing leaves that part of his case undone as well. Rochner, the ex-chief who initially disciplined Esqueda, said there's more to Esqueda's story than the public knows. I agree 100% with people coming forward, Rochner said, but people need to have all the facts before they jump to conclusions. Esqueda's case is unfolding as parts of the nation are passing police reform legislation. In Illinois, several of those provisions aim to protect whistleblowers and punish those who retaliate against them. Among the new laws is a rule that officers have a duty to intervene when they witness other officers committing brutality or other misconduct. Another law allows for police officers to lose their certification if they are found to have retaliated against another officer. Good officers despise bad officers, said Elgin Sims, the Illinois state senator who authored the reform bill. When you believe in duty and honor and protecting the community, you shouldn't have to worry about no one showing up to help you if you're on a call and you've blown the whistle on a bad officer. Sims says he didn't know the specifics of Esqueda's case, but he hoped prosecutors would resolve it in a way that assures the public that the system will protect them. Illinois Attorney General Kwame Raoul said he was aware of Esqueda's case but couldn't discuss any details. Speaking generally, Raoul acknowledged that whistleblowers can sometimes feel scared to report misconduct internally, but believes it's difficult for leaders in his state police agencies to fix issues in their departments without telling officers willing to talk to them. I can appreciate the process and procedures, he said. At the same time, I think it's important to not take the posture that would suggest that anyone being punished for whistleblowing. Esqueda believes that is exactly what is happening to him, while the officers he crossed the line to expose have not paid nearly the same toll. Every time I think about that video, I get choked up, Esqueda said of Lurie. I was taught that when people are in our custody, they're in our care. We are their caretakers. We don't treat a man that way, or you don't treat a man that way. He was a human being. As he was from the first time he counted the seconds on the video. Esqueda goes to his backyard pool sometimes and disappears below the surface. He tries to see if he can hold his own breath for 1 minute and 38 seconds, and he never can. Okay, we finally made it to the end of the article. That, like I said, that was a very loaded article. Like, I'm glad that I was sent this because it was an update to the story, but it also dove, like, it really went into that rabbit hole of what goes on in these departments when it comes to whistleblowing and everything like that. And we hear about stories like this often and also not often at the same time. I think Netflix did like a whole documentary about it, if I'm not mistaken. But that's crazy. This whole situation is crazy. I can't even really go and give my entire like take on this because they like I have no words. Like all of that was just like literally put into this article, this lengthy article. And I'm glad that I, made it all the way to the end because I was so intrigued with what I was reading. But it's just messed up at the end of the day. Like this guy right here actually is being reprimanded for doing what he felt was the right thing to do. And that was to expose the truth. But like I said, like they said, the truth hurts. The truth stings almost like a wasp stinging you. That's what the truth feels like. And like I said, I keep telling y'all, the police departments, especially this one right here, operates just like a gang. They literally do the same thing that gangs do with the no snitching and everything like that. And if you blow the whistle or snitch, look at how you get treated. This guy got treated like shit. They went from liking him one day to turning on him the next, like literally in the blink of an eye. And it just that fast. Just that fast. That's why I said I could not be a cop. Now, I said, with this being exposed right here has now told me without the shadow of a doubt that all of these departments not only follow this same code, but if you feel like you are going to be one of the quote unquote good ones, maybe you shouldn't be a cop at all. I mean, look at what happened with Christopher Dorner. He got reprimanded for doing what he felt was the right thing to do. And look at what happened after the fact. In my honest opinion, it's their fault they died. Well, the ones that got it or the ones that deserved it, in my honest opinion. But like I said, this shows how like the police departments operate like a gang. This story right here proves without the shadow of a doubt what many of us have speculated for years and most already knew. But I hope everything works out for this guy in the end. And he was definitely very brave for actually doing something like that. So I do commend him for even doing that, because he could have looked at this and said, I'm worrying more about my career. I'm not going to show anything. And we still would have been going off of their word. Even though I highly doubt we would have been really hanging off of their word. But I'm glad that he did what he did. He knew the risk. He knew the risk and took it. He understood the assignment, as they said, and he executed it. It's just unfortunate that this is the outcome behind it. But y'all let me know what y'all think down in the comments.